It is devolution of power. It is about the state of human rights, rule of law. It's about what measures they are taking, the government is taking, to ensure that Kenyans have basic needs. I will not read for you Article 10, but I am directing you where to see what ought to be in the State of Nation address. He is also supposed to publish in the Gazette the details of the measures and progress under paragraph 1, submit a report for debate to the National Assembly on the same. As you know, the second year finished on the 13th. Today is the 17th. While they take their sweet time, we are here to give the People's State of Nation address. Fellow Kenyans, today we stand not merely at crossroads, but at the precipice of a profound danger. A moment that demands our courage, our unity, our unyielding resolve to reclaim the destiny that is rightfully ours. The heartbeat of millions echo with the same question. How did we drift so far from the noble aspirations that birthed our nation? More importantly, how do we steer this great ship back on course towards the promise of liberty, justice, and prosperity for all? It is no longer sufficient to whisper our grievances in hushed tones or to point accusatory fingers from the shadows. The Constitution of Kenya, in its first article, bestows on us, the people, sovereign power. The sovereign power to shape our nation's fate. Leadership is not an emblem of authority, but a mantle of service. We must therefore ask with unwavering conviction, who among those in power today truly serves us? And how do we, the rightful stewards of this land, reclaim what we have lost? The state of human rights and civil liberties. A government's foremost duty is to safeguard the welfare of its citizens, and especially their fundamental rights and freedoms as provided by our foundational principles in Article 10 and the Bill of Rights. The Kenya Kwanza administration, during the recent Gen Z protests, through use of security agencies who included snipers, trivialized the right to life by the wanton killing of peaceful and armed protesters, mainly the youth. Over 60 people, according to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, lost their lives. Over 60 others still missing, hundreds injured, some gravely, with close to 200 hospitalized. The unprecedented falsification of official records at the city mortuary in Nairobi at the behest of security agents and refusal by the authorities to give accurate accounts leave the nation in darkness as to the actual numbers of the dead or the injured or the forced disappearances, abductions, as well as arbitrary arrests and illegal detentions, which have become the order of the day. The case of the abducted persons, who include the Langton brothers Jamil and Aslam, and Bob Jagi, which is now before the court, is a sad reminder of this. These murders, abductions, arbitrary arrests, harassment, and intimidation, including of the media, are all instigated to deter Kenyans from exercising their human rights and civil liberties, and especially the rights to protest and picket. They are the Ruto administration's response to the peaceful Gen Z protests. Today, protests have virtually been outlawed by the unconstitutional actions of the regime of setting up police to obstruct and unleash brutality, arbitrary arrests, abductions, and murder, instead of respecting and protecting human rights and civil liberties and facilitating their enjoyment by citizens. The Kenya Kwanza administration obliterates and violates these rights. We must not accept it or even acquiesce in this abrogation of our rights and calculated assault on our constitution. Corruption and impunity. Remember, Article 10 talks of transparency and accountability. The corruption is a venom that courses through the veins of our society, poisoning every institution it touches. The Auditor General estimates that 1/3 of the budget, approximately, which is close to 1 trillion, is lost annually. This is not merely a statistic, it is the stolen dreams of millions. The unbuilt schools, the unstocked hospitals, the unpaved roads, the education of our children, and much more. A conviction rate of 12.7% for corruption cases is a travesty of justice. It sends a chilling message that those who rob the public coffers do so with impunity, shielded by networks of complicity. The recent scandal involving 17 billion Kenya shillings in fraudulent fertilizer contracts, also known as the fake fertilizer scandal, underscores the brazenness in which the corruption is conducted. Our criminal justice system has failed us, and so has the Ruto regime. We must uproot this cancer with determination and vigor. It demands not only robust legal frameworks, but a cultural shift, a collective repudiation of graft in all its forms. The fight against corruption is not the responsibility of a few, but the duty of every Kenyan who yearns for a nation where integrity reigns supreme. This cannot be achieved under an administration that makes every effort to undermine the justice system by orchestrating withdrawal of economic crimes cases against the ruling elite and their cronies, or the undermining of such cases by the prosecution failing to present readily available evidence to the courts, like failing to call witnesses. Cases of land grabbing are also on the rise, with both private and public land being targeted. The state appears to be under the control and capture of corruption cartels. The state of devolution, a promise unfulfilled. When we embraced the 2010 Constitution, we ignited hope and belief that governance would finally be brought to the doorsteps of every Kenyan. Devolution was our collective pledge to ensure that no voice would go unheard, no community overlooked. Yet today, that beacon flickers perilously, threatened by those who seek to centralize power and silence those at the periphery. Article 174 of our Constitution envisioned devolution as a vessel for democratic and accountable governance, a means to enhance public participation, and a bridge to unify our diverse nation. However, the stark reality confronts us. The Kenya Kwanza government has systematically eroded this foundation. The Controller of Budget's recent report is a glaring testament to this betrayal. Only 52.3% of allocated county funds have been dispersed. Our counties are starved, their services crippled. In Kakamega, the county's referral hospital shelves lie barren, depriving our people essential medicines for months on end. This is but an example of the health crisis in the counties. The pledge by Kenya Kwanza to increase funding to the counties has been discarded, leading to the current stalemate between the county governments and the national government over Kenya shillings 20 billion. This regime finds it easier to defund counties, affecting services to over 54 million Kenyans, rather than reduce the wanton spending by the ruling elite. This is not mere negligence, it is calculated subversion of our constitutional rights, the push to reconcentrate power at the center. It's nothing less than an assault on democracy, a brazen attempt to reverse the hard-won gains of devolution. We must, with every fiber in our beings, defend this cornerstone of our constitutional order. Let it be known, any endeavor to dismantle devolution is an affront to the will of the people of Kenya and shall not be tolerated. My brother, Dr. Mukisa Kitui, takes over from there.
Thank you very much, Martha. Members of the media. Economic injustice, the new phase of colonialism. Our forebearers shed blood and tears to liberate us from the chains of colonial oppression. Yet today, a new form of subjugation tightens its grip, a homegrown economic imperialism that enriches the ruling elite and the cronies at the expense of the majority. The so-called bottom-up economic model was heralded as a panacea for inequality, but it has proven to be a mirage, a tantalizing promise that evaporates upon approach. We were promised an end to cartels, but now new and old cartels reign supreme, suffocating our economy and services. Inflation gnaws at the lifelines of our citizens. With food inflation soaring to a staggering 15%, the basic act of feeding one's family has become a daily struggle for survival. The Kenyan shilling's precipitous fall against the US dollar erodes the mega earnings of hard-working Kenyans. The hustler fund, rather than uplifting the downtrodden, ensnares them in an inescapable web of debt. A 14% default rate lays bare the grim truth. This is not empowerment. It's exploitation veiled in rhetoric. Moreover, the clandestine dealings with foreign entities, shady entities, such as the 30-year concession of our Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to Adani for a mere $1.8 billion, betray our very sovereignty. Such deals, shrouded in secrecy and devoid of public scrutiny, mortgage our future and place our national assets at the hands of those who do not hold Kenya's best interests at heart. We are united in demanding that the Adani deal should never come to life in this country. These agreements must be subject to rigorous examination to safeguard the interests of our people. In the mineral lands of Kwale, our brothers and sisters witness the plundering of their heritage. The wealth beneath their feet translates not into schools and hospitals, but into profits for a select few, while communities languish in poverty and suffer from environmental catastrophes like lead poisoning. The same is replicated in mineral-rich counties of Kakamega, Migori, Taita Taveta, Kitui, just to name a few. This is a travesty, a stark reminder that unless we stand united, our resources will continue to be siphoned away, leaving us with barren lands and broken promises. Are the likes of Adani a cover of cartels or the ruling elite? How else does a regime ignore the queries and interests of the electorate and instead become the protector and surrogate of a questionable foreign entity? Public debt, a ticking time bomb. We find ourselves today standing on the precipice of a tragedy so monumental it threatens to crush the hopes of generations yet unborn. The tragedy of order state. It is a chain forged not in the hands of the masses, but by those entrusted with the sacred duty to protect the future of this nation. And now, as the weight of this debt bears down upon us, we must ask ourselves, how did we get here? How did we, a proud and sovereign people, become ensnared in the machinations of reckless borrowing, our aspirations sold off to the highest bidder like wares in a marketplace? 10 trillion shillings. Let the sheer magnitude of this figure sink in. Fellow Kenyans, it is more than a number. It's an indictment. An indictment of an economic system that has failed the people of this country. An indictment of a leadership that has betrayed its people. This staggering sum, 67.4% of our GDP, is the milestone hanging around the neck of our nation, dragging us further and further into the abyss of a fiscal servitude. But this tragedy is not merely about numbers on a balance sheet. It's about our future, the future of every child born in this country, whose dreams are now mortgaged to service a debt they had not part in creating. Odious debt is debt that is incurred not for the benefit of the people, but to oppress them. And what have we seen? We are borrowing not to build schools, hospitals, or infrastructure that lift the nation. We are borrowing to pay other loans. A vicious cycle that enriches foreign lenders while impoverishing the people of Kenya. What development can arise from such an arrangement? What prosperity can come from a system that prioritizes debt repayment over the welfare of its citizens? This borrowing, dear patriots, is not only reckless but unconstitutional. Article 201 of our Constitution says, out of the principles of public finance, openness, accountability, and assurance that public debt shall only be incurred in a manner that ensures future generations are not saddled with untenable burdens. Yet here we are, our sovereignty compromised by those who wield the pen of fiscal irresponsibility. We have become beggars in our own country, beholden to international financiers whose interests lie not in the development of Kenya, but in the perpetuation of our financial dependency. Let's examine this closely. A nation may borrow to build highways that connect its people, ports that enable trade, and power grids that illuminate its future. But to borrow simply to repay existing loans, this is madness, a betrayal of the highest order. This is not the borrowing of a nation intent on development. It's the borrowing of a regime intent on its own survival. The funds are not being used to uplift the people, but to stave off the inevitable collapse that comes when greed and mismanagement become the order of the day. And let's not forget the recent Eurobond, issued at a punitive interest rate of 10.37%. What does this tell us about how the world views Kenya? We are no longer seen as a nation of hope, but as a nation of risk, a place where lenders demand exorbitant returns because they doubt our ability to repay. And don't you forget, the Eurobond was borrowed at a rate higher than the interest on the mature debt that we were offloading. We borrowed more expensive money to pay for cheaper money. That is kicking the can down the road for the next generation to suffer. This is the price of fiscal irresponsibility, and it's a price that will be paid not by those in power, but the mwananchi, the ordinary Kenyan, who wakes up every morning to eke out a living, only to find that their hard-earned money is being used to service debts that never benefited them and they never agreed to. Consider this, 54% of our revenue is now funneled into debt repayment. Over half of our national income is being siphoned away, leaving us with mere scraps to address the pressing needs of this nation. Schools are collapsing, hospitals are underfunded, infrastructure projects have ground to a halt, not because we lack the resources, but because those resources have been squandered. The dreams of development have been traded for the nightmare of austerity, all in the name of servicing a debt that should never have been incurred in the first place. What we are witnessing is a form of modern decolonization, not by foreign powers with guns and flags, but by faceless financiers and shadowy intermediaries. We are being colonized by debt. Our sovereignty, our very ability to determine our own future is being sold off piecemeal in the form of bonds, loans, and financial obligations that do nothing but enrich those who hold them. But this is not the Kenyan way. Our forefathers fought, bled, and died for the right to self-determination. They did not fight for us to be reduced to a status of financial serfs, chained to the whims of leaders whose only interest in Kenya is how much profit they can extract for themselves. We, the people, must rise and declare this, that it's enough. Enough is enough. We must demand transparency in our public finances. We must demand that every shilling borrowed be accounted for, and that it be used for the public good, not to line the pockets of the powerful. We must demand that our leaders stop mortgaging our future and start investing in it. And above all, we must demand that the Constitution be upheld, that borrowing for debt repayment be stopped, and that public resources be used to develop the nation, not to enrich a select few. Fellow Kenyans, the hour is late, but it's not too late. We can still turn the tide. We can still reclaim our nation from the grip of debt and fiscal irresponsibility. But to do that, we must act. We must speak with one voice, stand as one people, demand that our leaders serve the people, not their personal interests. Let us rise not in fear but in hope. The hope that comes from knowing that we are the masters of our own destiny. Let us rise in the spirit of our ancestors who fought for the freedom we enjoy today. And let us rise with a fierce determination that we will not allow this nation to be sold off, one bond at a time, to the highest bidder. This, fellow Kenyans, is our time for action. It is our moment. Let us seize it with both hands and forge a future where Kenya is not beholden to fallen creditors, but stands proud and free, a nation of prosperity, justice, and hope. Thank you, my colleague. You can speak up from there.
So I will now address the sixth issue, the state of the nation, that is health care, which we describe as a system on life support. Health is not a privilege reserved for the affluent. It is an inalienable right of every Kenyan, yet our healthcare system teeters on the brink of collapse, a victim of neglect and misguided policies. The introduction of the Social Health Insurance Fund, SHIF, was touted as a revolutionary step forward, but in practice, it has become a burden. Extracting 2.75% from already strained households without delivering tangible improvements. Essential medicines are scarce. 32% of public health facilities report chronic shortages, with a doctor-to-patient ratio of 1 to 6,355. We are failing to provide even the most basic medical attention. In our rural heartlands, this ratio is even more dismal, leaving thousands without hope of timely care. Without addressing systemic issues, SHIF is a facade, a superficial remedy that fails to heal the festering wounds of our healthcare system. We cannot, in good conscience, allow our people to suffer and die from preventable causes while funds are misallocated and mismanaged. It smells of cartels, and indeed legitimizes cartels in the health sector. No wonder Adani Group proposes to run it. The seventh issue we want to address is on education, which we are really describing as mortgaging the future of this country. As we stand at this crossroads, with the weight of history of our nation hanging in the balance, let us not mince our words. The erosion of access to education is a betrayal of the highest order. The introduction of the verifiable scholarship and loan funding, VSLF, model represents a monumental affront to the very essence of our constitution. And we are happy to report that we are here joined by University of Nairobi student leaders. A callous disregard for the promise enshrined in Article 43, Sub-Article 1F of our constitution, which guarantees every Kenyan the right to education. In its implementation, this regime has failed to consult the people, choosing instead to act unilaterally, and in doing so, it has deepened the charge of inequality that threatens to tear the fabric of our society apart and to deny the poor access to education. The VSLF model is not just a policy failure. It is an ideological assault on the most vulnerable among us. This shift from public responsibility to private burden is nothing less than a transfer of wealth from the powerless to the powerful. It is a tactic designed to push young Kenyans and their families into deeper financial despair, forcing them to carry the weight of a system that should, by every moral and constitutional measure, support them. We must call this out for what it is: a deliberate attack on the Kenyan dream. A nation that refuses to invest in its youth and sees education as a privilege rather than a right is a nation doomed to the shackles of poverty, ignorance, and oppression. We cannot allow this betrayal to stand. And we hope when President William Ruto gives you the State of the Nation address, we hope he will speak to this issue of the education. This is not the first time this regime has attempted to rob Kenyans under the guise of progress. We saw it with the Finance Bill 2024, an unjust tax burden that sought to extract from the poor while insulating the wealthy. Kenyans rose against it, rejecting a system that prioritized the comfort of a few over the livelihoods of millions. This new funding model is cut from the same cloth. It seeks to exploit those already struggling under the weight of a broken economy. Just as we rejected the finance bill, so too must we reject this oppressive and unconstitutional university funding model. But this injustice does not stop at university education. It permeates every level of our education system, from primary to secondary. The introduction of the competency-based curriculum, CBC, which restructured our education system into junior secondary and senior secondary, was heralded as a transformative step towards a better future. Yet, what have we witnessed? Instead of investing in our existing schools, we see opportunities cycling, waiting to enrich themselves through bloated construction contracts, pushing for new classrooms to build when we have facilities that can be upgraded and expanded. Are we to believe that the answer to our children's future lies in the pockets of the well-connected, or should we demand that the government prioritize the quality of education over the profit of a few? Let us be clear. The focus must not be on lining the pockets of tenderpreneurs, but on ensuring that our children, the leaders of tomorrow, have access to the kind of education that equips them to navigate the challenges of the modern world. Let us invest in what we already have. Let us build up our schools and uplift our children. And what of our 46,000 junior secondary school teachers, dedicated men and women who have endured the indignity of low wages and job insecurity as interns, carrying the future of our nation on their shoulders? These are the very people we entrust with shaping our children's minds, yet they have been treated as disposable. Is this the value we place on education? Is this the value we place on the future of Kenya? The government's recent commitment to absorb these teachers into permanent and pensionable positions is a step in the right direction. But we must not be fooled by half measures. There have been delays in implementation, and questions remain about whether these teachers will receive employment terms equal to their fully employed counterparts. This is not equity. This is tokenism. We must ensure that these teachers are not relegated to second-class status, but are treated as the professionals they are, with the full rights and protections they deserve. Their commitment to our children must be met with an equal commitment from the state. In all of this, we must not lose sight of the larger truth. The struggle for education is the struggle for our nation's soul. When we allow education to become a privilege for the few rather than a right for all, we allow the foundations of our democracy to be undermined. When we turn a blind eye to the exploitation of our teachers and the allowing out of our schools, we turn our backs on the future of Kenya. So, what is to be done? We must demand accountability. We must reject the empty promises and demand that those in power invest in the facilities we already have, in the teachers who guide our children, and in the students who will one day lead this nation. I turn to the eighth issue, which is employment and the informal sector. This we describe as dignity in labor. Our youth, vibrant and brimming with potential, find themselves adrift in a sea of unemployment. With 38.9% of young Kenyans jobless, we are witnessing a crisis of monumental proportions. The informal sector, the livelihood of our economy, employing over 83.4% of our workforce, is treated with disdain and disregard. The ruthless demolitions in Eastlands, Nairobi, displacing 37,000 small business owners, are emblematic of a government that has lost touch with its people. The border riders, the mamambogas, the artisans, they are not mere statistics but the heartbeat of Kenya. Their resilience and ingenuity deserve recognition and support, not bulldozers and eviction notices. The informal sector is not a blemish to be erased by a dynamic force to be harnessed. Policies must be crafted with inclusivity at their core, fostering an environment where every Kenyan can pursue their livelihood with dignity and security. I now turn to the ninth point, which is agriculture, the heartbeat of our nation under siege. Agriculture remains the backbone of Kenya's economy, employing over 40% of the population and contributing 26% to our gross domestic product. Yet today, our farmers, the lifeblood of our nation, are under siege from a system that has turned its back to them. Let me just explain this by sharing the example of tea and coffee, from this prosperity to poverty. For decades, Kenyans' tea and coffee were the pride of our nation, known across the world for their quality and providing livelihoods for millions of smallholder farmers. But in recent years, these industries have been plunged into turmoil. Middlemen, exploitative cartels, and a lack of government oversight have led to the decimation of our tea and coffee sectors. A recent report by the Kenya Tea Development Agency, KTDA, revealed that despite increased global demand, tea farmers are earning 60% less than they did a decade ago. The situation is even worse for coffee farmers, who are being squeezed by global price fluctuations and domestic inefficiencies. Many smallholder farmers in Nyeri, Kericho, and Kiambu have been forced to uproot their tea bushes and coffee plants, planting maize or even abandoning farming altogether due to the meager returns on the once lucrative crops. The fake fertilizer scandal orchestrated by this regime callously undermined our food security and demonstrated the extent to which the ruling elite are willing to go to enrich themselves at the expense of starving Kenyans. The promises made by the government to reform these sectors remain largely unfulfilled. Farmers were assured that new policies will stabilize prices and increase their earnings. But these promises have yet to materialize. The tea bill passed last year has done little to curb the influence of powerful cartels that continue to manipulate prices and dominate the market. Now let's look at the plight of the small older farmer. Beyond tea and coffee, the wider agricultural sector faces challenges that cannot be ignored. Farmers in Rift Valley, Nyanza, and Western Kenya are battling with rising costs of inputs, fertilizer, seeds, and equipment, while receiving little to no support from the government. The rising cost of fertilizer, which has shot up to 40% in the past 2 years of this administration, has left many unable to afford basic supplies. As a result, food security has stagnated, leaving Kenya increasingly reliant on imports to meet its domestic needs. This is not just an agricultural crisis. It is a national security threat. As we fail to support our farmers, we place the very foundation of our nation at risk. Agriculture is not merely an industry. It is the heartbeat of our people, our history, our future. Without immediate intervention, we risk becoming a nation that cannot feed itself. I now turn to the last issue, which is on our youth. This regime continues to betray the youth who they promise to support and economic transformation. The bottom-up economic agenda has turned into a self-aggrandizement strategy for the regime, starting from Mr. Ruto himself. Instead of cushioning the youth during these harsh economic times and securing their future, the regime is a leech in every facet of our society, but most especially the youth who are our future. When the youth stand against this regime, they were killed, they were suppressed. All our youth are at risk at the hands of this regime. Funds for critical dockets such as education, health, and social economic projects are being siphoned away, mortgaging their future. In conclusion, we want to say as follows. Fellow Kenyans, the hour is late, but it is not too late. The challenges before us are formidable, but they are not insurmountable. We are the descendants of warriors, and we must fix this country. And this regime and freedom fighters of men and women who faced down imperial powers to claim our independence. The same indomitable spirit resides within us. Let us rise together, not in despair, but in hope. Let us reclaim the promise of our Constitution, holding our leaders accountable and demanding the governance we deserve. Let us stand as one people and united by our love for this land and our unwavering belief in its potential. The future of Kenya is not written. It is ours to write, to shape. We are the architects of our common destiny. Let us all, in one accord, forge a path that honors our past, confronts our present, and secures a brighter tomorrow for generations to come. May God bless you all. May God bless Kenya. Thank you very much.
We thank you for your patience in listening to that People's State of Nation address. It was quite elaborate, but we invite one or two clarifications. Asha, will you take questions?
We can take questions. Anyone who has a question or clarification, and we'll be sharing the statement. Yes. Kindly introduce yourself and the media house.
So does Kenya, or does your team have maybe plans to conduct an independent investigation?
In matters of this nature, the state must be involved They are the ones holding the numbers. And they are the ones using the taxes we raise. So this is not just a call, it's a demand that this should be done. And I want to remind us that we do not know how many more bodies may be beneath the quarry. We know that good citizens who were trying to recover the bodies were tear gassed by police and stopped from this venture. We know the state has not shown any interest. We know of falsification of records. We are calling out the regime, the Ruto regime. They must account. These are calls for accountability. Yeah. And it's the same, even in the recent school fire. We have not been given definitive numbers. And even no empathy is coming from the house on the hill. They are going on with business as usual. We do not even know whether there is enforcement to ensure safety measures in all the schools.
Another question? Yes?
But now not.
Maybe you can comment on the issue of the withdrawal of the security from the judge.
Would you like to do that?
Yeah, so it's very unfortunate that because Masengeli was found guilty, that he conveniently withdraws security from the judge. And we also know that there have been personal calls to the judge's drivers and security on his whereabouts. So of course we suspect that the intention is probably to eliminate the judge. And it's unfortunate that judges are entitled to security by virtue of their work. So it's a cowardly act from Masengeli. But then again, you know, I'm actually not surprised that Masengeli is acting the way he's acting, because these are people who have no respect for the rule of law. They have no respect for the Constitution. You all must recall that part of the reason why the constitutional order in this country is failing is because we have somebody at the helm who never really supported this constitution. You all recall that in 2010, President William Ruto mounted a campaign against the Constitution of Kenya, 2010. So the fact that he disrespects, doesn't respect judicial authority, security of the judges, you know, it doesn't surprise me. In fact, I'm surprised Kenyans are surprised by the fact that this president doesn't respect the rule of law. But it is very, to be honest for you, it's very mediocre of him to actually do that. We know it's because Masengeli is supposed to be, and you know, the tragedy of this is this. You have police officers who are supposed to enforce court orders. Now, when they disobey court orders, what are we looking into? We are looking into a jungle country. Anarchy. We are looking into anarchy. Because if the policemen do not respect the orders of the court, then what do you expect Kenyans to do? This is anarchy in the making. And President William Ruto should be held accountable for that. I don't even know why he appointed this fellow Masengeli.
But just one point to add on to that. Remember, the Constitution makes the employer of every policeman, not the president, not anybody, but the people of Kenya through the National Police Commission. We want to ask the National Police Commission to wake up. They are in slumber. They should sanction their employee, one Masengeli. And if they are afraid of Ruto and his regime, they should go home and not take our money for work not done.
Perhaps we'll take few questions, but just to add on to that, it is also a deterrent measure to the other judges, so that in case any matter comes to court, judges develop cold feet. So for us, it's an intimidation tactic, and judiciary should stand up because it's an independent arm. It's a doctrine of separation of powers, allows judiciary to stand up, and we're telling Kenyans we should not go back to that route. The judge was doing his job and should not be persecuted or used as an intimidation tactic to other judges. So the next question.
Sydney Javina. Question is, you've mentioned something to do about the sale of the leasing of JKIA, and now we are seeing that the Minister of Energy is talking about giving Adani part of the grid, national grid. The question is, we've seen blackouts of machines flooding at the JKIA, which look premeditated. And someone mentioned that there might be a local hand getting that bill in the face of Adani. What is your take on that?
Dr. Muhisa will answer that.
I don't want to spread rumors, but I can say this as a fairly easy thing to see. Some thief from India called Adani cannot arrive in Kenya and all of a sudden take over things. Adani is the face of a cartel that includes top leadership in Kenyan politics. It is not about Adani. You saw the case of a similar thief in South Africa. It's a cartel that... what the Guptas did in South Africa is what Adani is trying to do here. But what to ask Ruto is if predecessors to him, some of whom, most of whom also had appetite for money, did not pound the family silver to the end, like he's doing, what gives him the moral authority to think that he can be a better thief than those who came before him?
Yes, your name and media house, kindly.
My name is Kevin.
Yeah.
I have two questions. What can you, in a scale of 1 to 10, how can you rate this regime? And maybe going forward, can we expect to see this team working together?
F for failure. And you are asking about this team? Yes, let Dr. Muhisa emphasize that about the team.
You know, there is a national failing in Kenya that if a few people offer leadership on critical matters, the rest of us go into retirement and let them do it for us. For a long time, Kenyans have asked Raila to carry the burdens for them, ask the questions on their behalf. And when Raila crosses over, they start feeling that it's a desert. Similarly, when Gen Z started showing that there's still the blood of national pride in a young generation in this country, a lot of others stepped back and said, let the Gen Zs take it. But what message are we saying? We share responsibility for the tomorrow of this country. We have shared experience and pride about service in public life, where we have served with integrity, without letting greed override us. And we say, we are called upon to start renewing our commitment and offer dutiful service to Kenya. We are part of a progressive effort that must reclaim our country. We are just starting now the re-engagement. You are not only going to see us together, you're going to see us with many more people who share the solid commitment and patriotic duty for a clean, decent Kenya that's not the laughing stock of Africa, but the pride that it once was.
Maybe a vote of thanks by one or two of the youths accompanying us.
Yes, we are grateful to our leaders who have come together to speak on the issues that hurt the country. And we are firmly behind them as the youth of this nation, because we want leadership that is informed by the love for this country and the future of this country. So as the youth of this country, we are solidly behind them and affirming that we are going to stand behind every leader who stands for integrity, who stands for accountability, and who stands for responsibility for anyone who is in office. Thank you.
So that's the end.
Thank you very much. That's the end of our presser today. We thank you so much for making time to come and listen to the State of the Nation address. Asanteni sana.
I had a phone.
We will share the statement for your media houses. Thank you.